This is Dr. Drake's office. On the wall, there are many recognitions, as you see. 민주의 종, 명예시민증, Certificate of Honorary Citizen from 경기 광주, and Certificate of Appreciation from Republic of Korea.
From Manizales, Colombia, the country of Colombia. I work with the marginal populations in the slum. Korea, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, different countries.
And this is his humble office in the basement. Here it is, George Drake. The Korean War Children's Memorial that he built.
I started 14 years ago on that.
Mm-hmm.
This photograph is at Kimpo Airport on the morning of December the 20th, 1950. The Chinese troops were at the northern edge of Seoul. Chaplain Blaisdell had rescued, he had taken 950 children and 100 orphanage administrators by truck to Incheon, waiting for a landing craft that would take them to Busan. The landing craft never came, and so he had to find some way to get them to Kimpo. He had made arrangements for the Air Force to come in with planes, 14 planes, to rescue the children. He literally had to steal the trucks from another unit and bring the children here. And so here they are arriving at Kimpo Airport. Now this is just, this is now on Jeju-do Island where the orphanage was established, called the Orphans Home of Korea. This is one of the little boys that was rescued in that rescue operation. Another one. Here's some kids living in the underground. Now here's at Kimpo that morning. Here they are on the plane. Look, you know, there's some 7 children died in the 4 days that they were at Incheon waiting for the LCM. But most of the planes, they had to just lift them up because there was only one of these, and I think there were 14 planes. Yeah, see, they're just lifting them up onto the aircraft.
Where was that? In Kimpo?
Kimpo.
When was it?
The morning of December the 20th, 1950.
1950?
50, yeah. A couple days later, the Chinese occupied Seoul.
No.
Here they are at the Orphans Home of Korea in Jeju-do. This is the way they lived. Sometimes you'd find them in holes like this. You know, they're going to the chaplain and being interviewed. Here's that same boy. His brother, blind from birth, has been helped by this kid through all the bombing and whatever, and stealing food for him and whatever possible. He was able to keep this brother alive. I found him in the archives of the U.S. National Archives in College Park, Maryland. I found him in the archives of the Pacific Stars and Stripes in Tokyo. Many servicemen sent me photographs, and I took about 200. I was with the photographer when he took this picture, by the way. This is at the Seventh-day Adventist Orphanage in Seoul. I worked on the assumption that the Stars and Stripes, since much of the material I found had been published in the Stars and Stripes Korea edition for the servicemen, I figured they must have archives, and I made contact. Yes, they had archives, and I got permission to use the archives. And so I went there with my scanner and my computer, the laptop computer, and I just, as fast as the old Japanese gentleman there was archivist, could bring me material, I was copying it. I wasn't even reading it. I knew what the situation was. It was horrific. It was outrageous. The most innocent victims of any war are the children. And you literally watch them dying. You watch them begging. You see mothers who are starving who will take their children to the edge of the company. I'm not talking about a child 6 weeks old, couple months old, a year old, they would take them to the edge of a military unit by the gate, put the child down, and run away as fast as they could, knowing that they could not survive with their income. They had no income. And the child would certainly die. If they left him with the GIs, there was a chance. At the 50th anniversary of the Korean War, the U.S. government, Congress, gave the the Department of Defense $9 million to celebrate 50th anniversary. Everything was about Incheon landing and Busan perimeter, Hill 22, and all battle. Nothing dealt with the humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I was upset. I had no intention of doing any of this, but I was upset. Let's face it, when I left Korea, I hated Korea. You cannot imagine being camped in a tent in the middle of a rice paddy that was fertilized with night soil regularly. I mean, it stank. You always confronted with the extreme poverty, with people dying. I would go hiking in the hills and I could still see the bodies lying by the side. You didn't dare touch because they were booby trapped. The cold, it's famous for the cold. I hated Korea. I never ever wanted anything to do with it and did not. I could not go to these military celebrations and whatever without crying. But I got so angry that everything of the 50th anniversary talked about the battles. Or you have something like Nogunri.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it, maybe, if true, 50, maybe 100 Koreans died. Hey, buddy, but we saved 1,000 children in one airlift. Yeah, but what does that got to do with the news?
Yeah.
Saving the children was meaningless. Even today, it's meaningless. That's what fascinated me. In 2010, the 60th anniversary, I started to get really angry and was sending letters all over saying, look, this has to be part of this has to be part of the history of the Korean War. I went to New York and spoke to the Korea Society. They were exploring Halversam's book, The Coldest Winter. And I said, it's garbage. It's a political military analysis. It could have been fought on the moon. There is no reference to the millions of Korean citizens that died,
Mm-hmm.
or the 500,000 Korean children that died. If that's all we have for the history of the Korean War, forget it. You're missing the fact that American servicemen, to be trained to go to Korea, they had to be taught to kill. And I went through that stuff. You have your rifle, you have a bayonet, and you have a sandbag there filled with sand, and you lunge at the sandbag screaming, kill, kill, at the top of your lungs. You have to be trained to kill. You don't have to be trained to pick up the crying child to offer solace. Feed the hungry child, find shelter for the homeless child, or take the injured child to a medic. That comes with being American. That was our values that we took to Korea to confront your values. Excuse me for saying you, but you're from Korea. But the Korean values, I should rather say. I was determined that story of love and compassion has to be part of the history of the Korean War, not just the battle. The reality is, this was not a command project. The military, qua military, had nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. These were the GIs that were forming their committees to address the needs of the children. It wasn't that Captain Gonzalo would say, all right, troops, stand up! We will each donate at the pay table. As you go through the pay table, Drake will be there with the can. Put something in. No. There was no official orders of any sort in this.
How did you connect with your parents and your people back home and be able to help more children? What did you do?
Go to my website, it's all there. I mean, I wrote, in my first 6 months, I wrote over 1,000 letters home. Now, I got all the GIs in the company to give me their home address and the name of their hometown newspaper. And I would mimeograph the letter. They would sign it, send it to their newspaper, send it to their parents, send it to their church. We collected, 12, 14 tons of material in 1 year. Our one little company of 200 men. Our 200 men donated over $4,000 from our pay of less than $90 a month. And that was happening all over Korea. And that's the problem. Why it has not gotten recognition. A newspaper reporter wants to interview me. And so the story is about George and what he did and one thing or another. And they're not a sociologist. In other words, they don't look at collective behavior, they're looking at individual behavior. I'm a sociologist, that's my profession. I look at collective behavior. And I know the methodological shortcomings of my research. It's all anecdotal, all of it. But my God, when you get 8,800 anecdotes that are similar, showing the same thing, I think you're close to touching a reality. So, no, except for Asbury and his report to the military in 1954, I know of no other such comprehensive analysis of what was happening in Korea with the children, the relationship of children to Korea at that time.
When did you station in Korea? When was the period? You went
Fall, I don't know, August, September of 52 to December of 53.
53.
Yeah, I was there at the armistice.
Armistice.
But also during some of the really nasty fighting, the end.
So you stayed there more than a year?
Oh yeah. No, it's almost a year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
And did you establish orphanages by yourself too?
No. In fact, on our orphanage committee, I wasn't the president, I wasn't the treasurer, I wasn't on the decision-making committee. I was in charge of correspondence. And if any package arrived, it went to me first, and I would copy the address of the donors. And the next day, I'd get a letter out to the donors. 감사합니다. Some of those are on my website. You know, I look under Manasseh's Manor. I think I put 30 or so of those letters on the website. You know, you had to thank them, and then come on, send us some more. Yeah, the American servicemen all over Korea were writing home. The material was sent by post office to APO 391, I forget what it was, in San Francisco.
Oh, then.
So the packages had accumulated so quickly and so many, the Army had to lease a freighter, especially to bring it to Korea. Donations. You know, the American public supported their kids. That's the little Johnny from next door. He's wanting our help. They would have a story. I wrote to my aunt living in Yakima, Washington. I said, for Christmas, don't send me a package for myself. Send me a package for the children. Here's what the story is. So, and I told the story. They published that in the Yakima newspaper. A little girl.
Do you have that piece in your website?
Yeah. A little girl read that. A 6-year-old girl. No, her mother read that story at the dinner table. And this little girl took her little wagon and went to the neighbors, begging for donations for the Korean orphans. 6-year-old child. So that was sent off to Korea, and I found out about it, and so there was then an article in the paper about this little girl going out collecting these. And when I had the ceremony here in Bellingham for the conclusion, the building of the Korean War Children Memorial, I found her. Of course, now she's 50-some years old.
Really?
Yeah. She wouldn't come. She was so, I wouldn't say traumatized, she was so shaken by the whole thing. She could not, she wanted privacy.
Why?
Ask her.
She just did for, asking for help, right?
Yeah. for those little children. Orphanages in America, the kids in these orphanages raised aid for the Korean War orphans. I have those stories. The Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops, church groups, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club. I mean, all these animal clubs, they all, pitched in to help. The amount of aid through the GIs. This wasn't going to UNCAC or commanding officer, U.S. Forces Korea. It's going to private so-and-so and corporal so-and-so and Air Force sergeant so-and-so. And they then would take it, as you saw in the pictures, they would then take it to the orphanage.
What do you suggest for us Koreans to do about this? The point that you made, that we don't want it to go back. We want to hide it. We haven't talked about it. We haven't healed it. What do you suggest?
More exposure. When my photo exhibit opened in Korea, GIs and the Kids a Love Story, of all places, it opened in the big hall at the entrance of the big brand new city hall in the metropolitan city of Gwangju. Now, Gwangju is not known for loving Americans. Gwangju, the servicemen in the base nearby, American servicemen, were not welcomed. The leaders of that base had never been invited to any function at City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And here comes Georgie Drake with his photo exhibit, GIs and the Kids, a love story. For the first time ever, Mayor Gwangtae Park invites the military to come in. They all came in civilian clothes. The commander of the unit came in civilian clothes. And he said, Drake, I've never been invited here before. The publicity on that was all over Korea.
That's the legacy of Gwangju. I'm proud of it. Yeah.
And I then met with the public affairs officer of the U.S. Forces Korea. And he said, Drake, you have provided us more positive visibility in Korea than we've had in the last 10 years. This is wonderful. And I said, thank you. Now put your money where your mouth is. Why should I pay for what your job is? You didn't pay for that exhibit. You didn't pay me to put it together. You put no money in it, and yet you're stroking yourself because of this wonderful publicity. That was your job. How about some money? No, I have gotten not one single cent from the U.S. military. One last comment. Kim Moon-soo, governor of Gyeonggi Province. Mm-hmm. I appreciate him. He's the one who saw that Seoul Broadcasting System video and contacted me and expressed personal appreciation. He cared. He said it was so emotional. He had to recognize it. That's what we need, is more Korean people. Officials.
Where you born and so on?
I was born in northern New Jersey, in a very, very poor family. Mind you, this is 1930, the Depression.
Before. Oh, yeah.
I grew up first 12 years in the northern part of the state, and I was witness to acts of extreme poverty, people losing their apartment, everything moved out on the street, the old lady sitting on top of the pile crying with no place to go. No place to go. This is 34, 35, very, very poor. We moved to the southern part of the state, and we lived in a quasi-rural area. I went to a 4-room school and then to a local high school.
Where?
In Manasquan, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
But I was one of these kids that always loved the outdoors, and so I became the expert on wildflowers for about 20 miles around. I knew them all. I knew where to find the Indian artifacts from the old Indian tribes that used to live there. And anyway, and when I finished high school, there was no money in our family for college. I had a job in a store, and I didn't see myself working in that store the rest of my life. So I bought a bicycle and headed for South America. I spent the next year and a half working in Central America. I only got to Panama. working back in the jungles and the mountains, doing incredible.
You mean you rode down to the Latin America?
I
with
rode
that bicycle?
to Guatemala.
Oh,
I
boy.
sold the bike in Guatemala. No, I didn't ride all the way.
I know, but you hitchhiked and then
Well, I put the
and-
bike on the top of a bus or in the back of a truck, but also I rode many miles. I still ride. I did my last bicycle race when I turned 80 years old. I got a gold medal in the state
How
games.
old are you?
82. So but after that experience, then I came home and enlisted in the army, and
When was that?
that I came home in June of 1950, and of course I was eligible for the draft. So I said, "You got to find me," and I took off to Europe and hitchhiked all over Europe for 6
You
months.
ran away from the Korean War, but finally ending
Well-
up with the orphans.
I didn't run away from the Korean War. I had no interest in getting shot.
Absolutely.
So
No blame.
then, knowing that I would be drafted, I came home, enlisted in the Army, wanting to be in the Army Engineers and do topographic surveying, which was what I was doing in Central America. But they put me in the Army Intelligence, taught me Chinese and high-speed Morse intercept, and sent me to Korea where I could be useful. And that's how I got to Korea.
And when and where did you arrive in Korea?
Oh, God. Well, we landed in Japan first, and somehow I think we probably flew into Kimpo. I don't know. I don't recall.
1952.
52, yeah, in the fall of 1952. I'd have to look up and find the dates. I have my paperwork on it. ¿Qué más? What else? And after that, I went to university and became a university professor.
What did you teach?
I taught community organizations, community systems theory, evaluation of social programs, social change, etc. At university, at the master's level, I did a review of Chinese language and also Tibetan language. And at the doctoral level, I used Spanish and French. And have done a lot of research on political power structure in Latin America, both in Mexico and in Colombia. But I've also worked with tribes in the Amazon basin and tribes in Peru, and I've been involved in many activities in many countries.
Currently, America is involved in several fronts of the war or quasi-war, and you've been there in Korean War. I saw the big banner in front of your office as Korean War veterans, no war.
Yeah.
What is the message to the young generations in Korea and all over the world about what's going around?
I think the first requirement is to recognize the price of war. And I don't mean the wasted dollars spent on tanks and such that could have been spent on healthcare or education. The loss of life, the devastation, the destruction of the environment. The loss of 500,000 children, North and South. To me, it's all one Korea. It's too high a price to pay for failed diplomacy. We have war academies, we don't have peace academies. We have to do a better job of understanding. I can tell you this in a different way. I was invited as a Korean War veteran to talk to our local high school on Veterans Day. They invited different veterans. All right.
Tell America program?
Pardon me?
Tell America program?
I don't know what they call it. Senior students. So I sat cross-legged on top of the table. I'll be damned if I'm going to act like an academic. And I said, you've got a live one. What do you want? One student said, tell us war stories. I said, no. War is not entertainment. I didn't come here to entertain you. Ask me a serious question, I'll consider answering it. Did you enlist or were you drafted? I enlisted. Why? Because somewhere I believe in patriotism. I believe in responsibility for your government and for your culture and your friends and your neighbors, your communities. And there was a call, and I went to defend democracy. And I said, this is a civics class.
Yeah.
this is a civics class. Will somebody define democracy? No one could. No one could. I said, what the hell are you studying here? And Storta was a little bit embarrassed. And I said, all right, since you're no good at theory, let's talk about practice. Over the years, I've been a host for international visitors program for the State Department. They have visitors that tour the United States for 30 days at full expense of the U.S. government. And over the years, for 30 years, I've had over 100 delegations come to Bellingham. I'm to show them democracy in small town Bellingham. What should I show them? And one kid said, oh, you could take them to the movies. And I said, I saw Rambo in Chongqing, China last year. Do you think that portrayed America? Is that what we want people to think of as democracy in America? Rambo? No. Another kid said, we got a beer bust. I said, do you realize this is almost Kristallnacht? Kristallnacht was when the Nazis destroyed the synagogues of Germany and Austria and throughout Europe. And they had one hell of a beer bust. You think a beer bust has anything to do with democracy? And I turned to a kid in the back of the room and I said, what would you have me do? And the teacher intervened and said, one has just arrived from Spain. He's only been here a week. He doesn't speak very much English. You would do better asking somebody else. And I said, no, podemos hacerlo en español. Entre una semana voy a recibir, I will receive 3 visitors from Panama, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. What should I show them to teach them democracy? ¿Qué puedo mostrar para enseñarles a ellos cómo está la democracia aquí en Bellingham? And he responded immediately, llévatelo a una reunión del ayuntamiento, take them to a meeting of the city council. Right on.
Yeah.
And a girl right up by me, would you translate? And I said, no. You think the only way to defend democracy is shoot somebody. You could start by learning another language.
Mm-hmm.
You could start by going to another country and sit on the curbs and find out why they hate us. And why, what are their dreams and what are their wishes. And
Almost. So
that's
the
my
message.
start,
Yeah.
The Koreans have to learn another language too.
Yeah.
And they've got to take a good look at their own culture.
Yeah.
There is a man who wrote a book about dealing with Korea, doing business in Korea.
Yeah.
He said he's worked in 97 countries. The United States is the most open and accepting of diverse cultures and attitudes, and Korea is the least.
George, thank you so much for your time, your compassionate energy, and willing to talk. And I really appreciate your 14 years of work on this. What do you call this?
My cabin. Years old, turned 17 years old. That's the way I looked with my knapsack. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you keep all this.
I visited Indian camps. I visited national parks. I visited Boy Scout camps. And I slept under bridges in city parks. And here's my handwritten.
Look at all this. Planning a bike trip seeking El Dorado in 1948. And all this file. He kept photographs, letters, notes, everything.
Yeah, I would write these and send them home to my mother.